left. And the numbers are in the middle and on the other side. So in the middle, you see the total mass of the thymus goes down quite considerably, even by the age of 30. But what's really important is the functional mass, those cyan points at the bottom. They go down precipitously, very, very low by the age of 30. And I broke that down in more detail on the extreme right. So what you see is by the time you're 25 or so, you've lost 75% of your functional thymic mass. This is kind of important because, as most of you will know, you need the thymus to make T cells, which is a cornerstone of your immune system. By the time you're 31 or so, you've lost 90% of your functional thymic mass. But why do we survive? We survive because the cells that you made in youth last for a really long time, but they run out eventually. So my thesis is that most people die of an indirect consequence of thymic involution. So we can study aging and its facets, but what do we actually die of? I would contend that most of us die indirectly of thymic involution. So the evidence kind of starts with the death rates from the flu. You can see on the leftmost panel, your risk of dying from the flu goes up by a factor of 100 logarithmically as you go from the age of 10 to about the age of 70. And then a little bit later in life, we have data for COVID-19. Again, the same 100-fold increase in your risk of death as you go from a little older than 20 years of age. And then a little bit later than that, prostate cancer comes in. So I look at infectious disease death risk and cancer death risk as surrogate markers for thymic failure, because the thymus can clean up infectious diseases, it can clean up cancer. So if you die of these things, it's a sign that your thymus is not really working as well as it should. So if you add up all of the deaths from infectious disease and cancer, and you plot that as a function of total death risk, by the age of 50, about 30% of your total risk of death is from causes that relate back to the functional integrity of your thymus. And you can just imagine where that curve extrapolates to after the age of 50, but the CDC didn't have the data when I compiled this figure. But to get an inkling of it, I'm going to introduce you to something called the Naylor cliff. That's what I call it. So that's a sum total of all the antigens that your immune system can recognize as foreign. So these are anything abnormal that might want to kill you or end up killing you. So you actually do pretty well until the age of 62. You're like a 20-year-old until the age of 62. But between 62 and 78, you lose 2 orders of magnitude from your immune repertoire, the versatility of your immune system. So considering what happened to you before the age of 50, you can only imagine what happens between the beginning and end of the Naylor cliff. So I would contend that that actually pushes your risk of death from thymus-related causes over 50%. And there's much more evidence in support of that. For example, for those who are interested in telomere biology and cellular senescence, the functional immune system can remove senescent cells, but it was recently learned that an activated CD4 T cell can actually restore telomeres to cells that are deficient in telomeres, transfers them bodily from the CD4 cell into the cells that are senescent, reverses senescence, cleans up senescent cells in organs like the brain, the liver, the kidney, etc. But beyond that, if you give a thymus transplant to an old mouse, it reverses aspects of brain aging and liver aging. And we're working with a group at Wake Forest that believes that the thymus regulates vascular health as well. And of course, vascular health underlies cardiovascular disease, which kills most of us. So just to convince you a little bit more before we dig into the details, a study was published in New England Journal of Medicine a couple years ago about people who had open heart surgery. And of course, the thymus is right under your breastbone. So when they go through your sternum to get to the heart, half the time they throw your thymus away. It's kind of a nuisance. So somebody got the bright idea of going back and seeing what happens to people that have that happen. Bear in mind, this is people who are already late in life. They've already lost most of their thymic mass. This data shows that you need every shred of thymus you can get, because if they take your thymus out, compared to not taking it out, your total risk of death within 5 years goes up by a factor of 3. That's death from all causes. Your risk of death from cancer almost 2.5 times. Risk of cancer occurrence doubles. The risk of cancer recurrence goes up by 4-fold. And if you do have your cancer recur after you've had a thymectomy, the chances that it comes back in severe, hard-to-control form go up by a factor of 7. And then last month in Science, a couple of papers came out. I've just extracted some of the data. If you have high thymic function versus low thymic function, you obviously have a much higher potential to survive. But of course, this paper looks at thymic function by the metric of older people. And this is just a ghost of what you could achieve if you could actually have a younger thymus. In the bottom panel there on the right, it just shows that cardiovascular deaths are dramatically higher in people that have poorly functioning thymuses compared to ones that have good thymuses. So I think the thymus is really, really important. So what do you do about it? Well, what we do about it is we regrow the thymus. So it's been known in many animal models that you can, and in human models, HIV patients, that you can regrow the human thymus with growth hormone. But growth hormone has side effects. We combine growth hormone with DHEA and metformin to get rid of the diabetogenic effect of growth hormone. We also add D3 and zinc to prevent nutritional deficiencies. So what we showed in our paper in Aging Cell in 2019 is that we can regrow the thymus in people over the age of 50. So our trial was 50 to 65-year-olds, and you see in the upper left pair of panels there that the thymus looks darker in an MRI scan. That's because fat looks whiter or paler gray, and you can see the darkening. So below that, you see some three-dimensional renderings of the thymus. It sort of subdivided it into areas that were highly active and highly fatty. So fat is yellow and white, and highly active is red. And you can see that the more functional part of the thymus is practically non-existent before we regenerated it, but very extensive afterwards. Can it be regenerated? I mean, can this be duplicated? The answer is yes. So in so we've done a series of studies, TRIM-X A, B, C, and a few others. So, but in TRIM-X B, we repeated these MRI measurements. The color coding is different, but the result is the same. You see that in the bottom panel after regeneration, we have a lot of blue and green, which is coded to be functional thymic mass. All right, so the question really is, okay, we can regenerate the thymus, but does it do you any good? Well, actually, before we even get to that, can we regenerate thymus independent of your age? The answer to that seems to be yes, at least so far. So in the upper right pair of panels, I've expressed the thymus result that we've documented in terms of the increment in the percent of the thymus that's functional. And I did that because of what you see on the left. So that's that same figure I showed you before, percent of peak functional mass versus age. By the time you're between 40 and 60, you're down around 5% of the amount of functional mass you had before. So if we could increment that by even 5%, we would take you back in immunological time quite substantially. So what you see on the upper right is the raw data for individual thymic increments over time in our original study in 2019, and then just those results plotted against age. And you see that R square shows there's zero correlation between age and functional, the ability to regenerate the thymus. And then in TRIM-X B, we show the same results. There's one guy who didn't regenerate his thymus very well, but he was right in the middle of the age range. So once again, there's no age dependent. So we can do this, people of any age so far up to the age of 68. That's as high as we've looked so far. So does this do you any good? Does the thymus actually do anything? So what the thymus is supposed to do is to produce new CD4 and CD8 T cells. So we've looked at 3 different flavors of these, just naive CD8s and naive CD4s, and then a very, very freshly shed CD4 type naive T cell called a recent thymic emigrant. And so what you see is in our original paper and then in our follow-up studies, the naive CD8 T cells increased by 20%. That may not seem like a lot, but that's sufficient to negate 11 years of previous losses of those cells due to aging. So actually, that's like the equivalent of 11 years of aging reversal in that compartment. And same with CD4 T cells. We only increase them by 13%, but actually that's the equivalent of about 28 years of losses of those cells. And actually, that's really underestimating the effect, because that ignores the effect of the Naylor cliff on the versatility of those cells that are coming back. All the new cells coming back have new that you're adding to your stock. So the middle panel there shows the recent thymic emigrant studies that we've done. I've only got 2 examples. It can get kind of busy, but this is a little difficult because the RTEs decline with age on an exponential scale, not a linear scale. But I've given you 2 examples. So we had a guy who was 71 years old. We took him back to an RTE age about 15 years younger. And the point I want to make about him is that if you compare him to the Naylor cliff, which is reproduced above that, he's that red vertical line. So he was well down that Naylor cliff, and we dragged him back up that cliff and put him up on that plateau. Now, at least superficially, there's a lot more analysis that has to be done, but that's very encouraging. And then the female volunteer, she was right before falling off the Naylor cliff, and we dragged her back from that. So that means that she had a really good repertoire, but now she's not going to lose it a few years later. She's going to keep that repertoire for a long, long time. So we're really excited about that. And then the other thing that happens when you expand the number of new T cells in the immune system is the old T cells have to make way, because your immune space is limited. So as new T cells enter, old cells have to be gotten rid of. So we saw a reduction in exhausted PD-1 positive CD8 T cells, which block your ability to reject cancer. So Opdivo and Keytruda rake in billions to do the same thing, but we have no side effects, and it's cheap, and it lasts a long time. And that's just by making your immune system younger again. It's just a natural effect of that. So we wanted to now go the next step beyond that and say, okay, we got new T cells, that's great, but do the new T cells actually do anything? Do they have improved function? So we just started off recently looking at the stimulation index. So this is on our latest trial, the TRIM-XP trial. We'll bring up a little bit more about that shortly, but you see that baseline 25 to 30-year-old T cell stimulation index around 4. You get up to 45, it's down around 2.5. So in our cohort in XP, we had people with median age of 62, and their baseline T cell stimulation was similar to the 45-year-olds, but within 3 months you could begin to see the curve go up, and at 6 months we had statistically significant increases in stimulation index similar to what you see in youth. So that's very encouraging. And then there's this one case, it's just one case, so it's an anecdote, but it's so amazing. I just had to share it with you. So one of the guys, the oldest guy in the XP trial, he entered, we didn't know it at the time, but he entered with an inverted CD4-CD8 T cell ratio. That's a signature of what has been called the immune risk phenotype. This happens if you have a viral infection. Turns out he has EBV. So EBV, CMV, viruses like that, they represent themselves to the immune system over and over and over again. And your immune system does what it should. It raises up T cells to get rid of them, CD8 T cells to get rid of them, but that drives out your naive T cells. So over time, your immune system gets weaker and weaker. You're really good at getting rid of EBV, but you don't need that. You're already able to do that. So what I've never seen is a reversal of the inversion. So after 120 days on our treatment, his ratio went almost up to normal. So we're really hoping we can reproduce that. Okay, so the other aspect of aging and immunity is inflammaging, and there's plenty of ways of measuring inflammaging, and we have to plead poverty. We couldn't afford most of these assays, but we did do CRP, and it's a really good general purpose measure of general inflammatory state of the person. In our original TRIM study, we found a reduction of about 50% after 9 months, and pretty much the same result after 12 months. In TRIM-XA, we measured this again in men and women. We actually had 6 women in the trial. We don't have complete data for this in more than 3 of them. You see, if anything, an even bigger drop in CRP, and the result is highly statistically significant even when you combine the 2 sexes. Okay, so then the reason that our paper really caught a lot of attention is it showed something completely new at the time. So as you all know, if you enter a clinical trial and it lasts for 1 year, normally at the end of that 1 year, you would be a year older biologically. Now, if you could achieve Aubrey's concept of longevity escape velocity, or at least get right up to the edge of it, then you would escape aging. So for every year that went by, you reverse your aging by 1 year, you don't age at all, right? That's that horizontal dotted line. What we showed is that at the end of 1 year in the trial, instead of being 1 year older, you were 1.5 years younger, which means that we reversed the year that you were on the trial plus 1.5 years on top of that. Now, Irina Conboy pointed out, these clocks don't have mechanistic significance in most cases, so does this really mean anything? And I think that it really does, because regardless of mechanisms, these clocks do predict what's going to happen to you. And so this is a paper that showed that in 1,091 Scots living in Edinburgh who were followed until they were 70 years of age or so, if you measured their grim age at a baseline and then followed them for mortality afterwards, you could predict which ones were going to die and which ones weren't with pretty good accuracy based on their grim age. So if you had a low grim age, not very old by grim age standards, your mortality was way, way, way higher, less than if you had a high grim age. And also your brain worked and you didn't have as many vascular lesions either, getting back to the potential connection between what I would say the thymus and the vascular system. But in any case, so that's what we showed in TRIM. So the question then is, can we reproduce that? And the answer to that is yes too. So on the left, you see in the upper panel the average of 4 different epigenetic aging clocks going back about 2.5 years at 12 months. And then below that, Dr. Horvath went back and looked at our plasma data and applied a completely different non-epigenetic clock, the Morgan Levine plasma pheno-age clock, and found that she saw the same effect. So in TRIM-XA, we reproduced the 4 clocks that went back in reverse, and we added 4 more clocks to that, 4 clock categories, 21 clocks in all. And these are clocks that predict whether you're going to have chronic conditions, functional impairment, cognitive dysfunction, or death within the next 3 to 5 years. In XP, we decided to see if we could accelerate these aging reversal effects, and the answer is yes. So you see in the upper curve there on the right that we didn't get much aging reversal in TRIM-XA, but in TRIM-XP, we got age down by 1 to 2 years in just 1 to 2 months. It usually takes 9 to 12 months for that. I'm just going to make this point because going back to that longevity escape velocity concept, we had 2 guys that entered the TRIM trial and then entered the XA trial later on. And this is what their Levine ages look like over time. And as you can see, if you take the average of them out to 8 or 9 years, we're not finding any Levine age changes. So that's kind of interesting. I'm making no claims about this. It's just too interesting, though, to hold on to. I wanted to share that. More evidence is we saw hair darkening in TRIM and in our follow-up studies, although in different ways. Eyebrows, eyelashes going from white to dark again. Hair quality, at least, coming back so far early in TRIM-XP. Okay, so more physiological evidence that these aging clocks are actually measuring something real. What do they do for you in the real world? Well, they make you stronger. So this is like the $6 million man. I call it the $6 million thymus. We can make you stronger, faster, better. Well, we can make you stronger, apparently. So without any exercise, people in our trial showed a 15% increase in muscle strength, which is the equivalent to 4 to 11 years of previous decline in muscle strength, depending on how fast your decline would have gone as baseline. People vary in that regard. Now, there's one guy that just blows everything off. So I consider him to be like the Incredible Hulk. This guy could do 120 push-ups at baseline, and after 9 months, he could do 50% more than that. After 15 months, he doubled it. So your mileage may vary. I can't claim everyone will have these results, but it's awfully neat. We improved VO2 max by 21%. That's equivalent to 22 years of aging reversal in VO2 max, which is highly related to mortality. If we take this at face value, that would predict a reduction in mortality of 40% over 11 years. But of course, we have no data to back that up. In TrimXP, after 3 months on the trial, a guy who was taking 12 minutes to run a mile could start running the mile in 8 minutes. And we had a guy in XA who started doing 5K races at the age of 81 and started winning them. And we've had other anecdotal reports along the same lines. Frailty went almost to zero. This is a sit-stand test going to up with immense statistical significance. And then these radical improvements in cardiovascular risk factors, dropping your diastolic blood pressure from 85 to 65, dropping your resting pulse rate from 72 to 62. These are significant, and we've had a lot of anecdotal reports of other things just going right on the trial, and I don't have time to go into them. You also get skinnier. People lost 4 kilograms of fat, and they gained about 1.3 kilograms of lean body mass. We think the trial is safe. PSA went down in the original study, didn't go down in XA, but it didn't go up either. Percent free PSA went up, which means less cancer risk. We have sometimes inability to completely control the diabetogenic effect of growth hormone, so sometimes insulin goes up, sometimes it doesn't, but glucose and hemoglobin A1C actually go down, although not significantly. And then creatinine changed very, very slightly. So I want to just touch on the end here about this further safety. So there's a lot of mythology in aging, the biology of aging, that growth hormone and IGF-1 are pro-aging factors. This is not true. And one of the pieces of evidence to this is that you would expect that if you gave massive doses of growth hormone to a mature animal, not a transgenic animal whose developmental program was changed by the transgenetic modification, you'd expect that they would live a shorter life. That's not the case. So here's studies in male and female rats and mice given massive human doses of growth hormone to a mouse or to a rat for their whole life or for the later part of it, in no case showing life shortening. And Arthur Everett did a tumorigenesis study and found no increase in tumors in animals that were getting up to, 4,000 times the human dose of growth hormone. The FDA does not recognize cancer as a side effect of growth hormone, and there have been other studies that say the same thing. We're gearing up to go after the finals for the $101 million X Prize Health Span competition, which we've got some pretty good data. Thank you. We haven't been approved yet, but our fingers are crossed. We've got good immune data and muscle data that I've told you about before. Their third criteria is we have to reverse brain aging also. Turns out there's all kinds of reasons to think that we might do that, and we have some very early data showing we can measure brain aging reversal of about 4.6 years, 3.2 years, et cetera, including increased white matter content of your brain, which tends to go down as you get older, and positive trends in gray matter. So we have other stuff on the drawing board, but I'm out of time, so I'm not going to go into that, except I just want to touch on the Immortal Thymus Project. If the thymus is really as important as I'm making it out to be here, if you never had to undergo thymic involution, what would that do to your lifespan? Well, nobody knows, but we can find out. So there is a transgenic a mouse model that can maintain its thymus forever, and you can start it before the thymus ever involutes. So this is going to be the Immortal Thymus Project. We think it'll double the lifespan of mice. It's never been done before. So come to our website and maybe give us some contributions for this, because we need them. So I just want to thank you on behalf of myself and my team at Intervene Immune and all of the volunteers who have worked very hard to make it possible for me to give this presentation to you today, including Walter Crompton, who's in the audience right there. All right, Walter. So if I've lied to you, I'm sure Walter will tell you all about it. So thanks for your attention. That's it.
Thank you, Greg. That was a great talk. We have a question over there already. I registered, and we're going to go to Shannon X, but I'm going to be the first because I got the microphone. Okay. So, Greg, you and I, we spoke about the work that was done in mice, transgenic mice, and I think I don't need to tell you about it, but could you please refer to that or talk about that briefly?
Yeah.
And growth hormone, obviously.
Yeah. So what Steve is referring to is a little story that I told him about a paper that none of you have read, but you should all read if you're in the biology of aging and you think that IGF-1 is important and growth hormone is important for aging or a driver of aging. So it turns out that these transgenic animal models are an artifact. So what actually happens is that in the normal course of brain aging, in the normal course of your life, if you're a mouse, you finish wiring your hypothalamus around, I forget the exact date, but around day 5 of postnatal development. And what that does, as Dongsheng Kai's lab has pointed out, is it causes an inflammatory state to develop in the medial basal hypothalamus, in which the neural stem cells in that area start spewing stuff into your cerebrospinal fluid that goes into your body that programs body-wide aging. And the reason that these transgenic animal models work is because they block the rewiring of the brain that takes place in day 5 of postnatal development. And it has nothing to do with what happens with aging other than that. And the reason that they were able to prove that is if you give growth hormone on day 5 of postnatal development, the transgenic animals don't live longer than control animals, even though they have the transgene, even though they don't express growth hormone and IGF-1. So it's all been misdirection. So I've suspected this for a long time, but anyway, that paper puts the frosting on the cake. So I don't think that IGF-1 and growth hormone are pro-aging. Now, they can be. I mean, there are side effects. Don't get me wrong. You've got to be careful about this, but it's not like people think. And I think that actually people who are focusing on getting rid of IGF-1 as a remedy for aging are dooming the recipients of that treatment to death because you need IGF-1. You know, if you give growth hormone to an old person, it regenerates their kidneys, it regenerates their hearts, it regenerates a lot of stuff. And people don't know about that either, but you know, you're losing cells, you need cells. You have to have, aging is catabolic and growth hormone makes things grow, it's anabolic. So as long as you can deal with the cancer issue, which maybe we can deal with pretty well if you have a really great immune system, it's got to be part of an anti-aging intervention, in my opinion. That's my opinion.
Wow, applause for a question. Pretty good. Okay, so, yeah, this lady had her hand up way before this lecture was over, but obviously I didn't want to get you like carpal tunnel syndrome or something like that. Here you go.
Thank you. Very interesting work with the immune system. I wanted to know whether or not you corrected for men who lose their Y chromosome, because we know that 40% of men, particularly those who smoke, lose their Y chromosome, and that will affect their immune function. So I just want to know if you corrected for that in the data.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll be right back. Okay. Do you want to do a follow up to her question, or do you have a new? Okay, I'll be back. Okay, here we go.
I'll walk over to you to save a little time here.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was not aware of that. That's fascinating. So there's another study I am aware of that seems like it's a little bit in tension with that. So there's a study on Amish families that go back several generations, and there were some clans in that colony that had a major deletion of the long arm of the Y chromosome. And those men live longer than the women. They live like 12 years more than intact males. So there's something bad on the Y chromosome, but there may be something good there too. So
that after age 60 or 70, many of them lose their Y chromosome, and that's just
yeah, so I don't know about that, but I'd love to look into that. So we have not done genotyping on anybody, so we don't know if they've lost their Y chromosome or not. Okay.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my job.
Yeah.
Okay, Irene. Could you pass this to Irene, please? No, sit down. We're good. There we go. See, we'll all cooperate together. Here we go.
Thank you. So speaking from the point of view of PhD in immunology, molecular cell immunology from Stanford, our thymus deconvolutes because thymic cortical epithelial cells keep presenting autoantigens to tolerate the cells that are produced by the bone marrow. And they're all gone. We don't have them anymore. So that is the first part. The reason that we shift our T cell receptor repertoire dramatically and it declines when we are old It's not because we don't have a thymus, but because hematopoietic stem cells age at the age that you demonstrated, and they stop making productive T and B cells, and they start overproducing myeloid subsets, which has been extensively published. So that is just a comment on what happens to our thymus. Growth hormone, of course, will affect all of the points that you mentioned, such as body weight and strength, completely unrelated to what happens to the thymus. So then my actual questions are like two questions. First of all, your 20% improvement in circulating, I'm assuming, naive CD4, CD8 positive cells, and 13% improvement is compared to what? Was it done in blinded, randomized fashion? And then, of course, I have to mention about the clocks. I know that your clock, what you call predictions, that actually de novo data fitting, was not done in a blinded, randomized fashion. Was it at least done independently, submitting two samples, and the clock labs do not know which sample comes from?
All right. Thank you, Irene. Okay, we're going to give it back here. All right, Greg, go ahead.
So there's a lot of questions. There's a lot to unpack there, and I may forget half of your questions, Irina, but if...
No, I made a comment.
Okay.
Immunology perspective for the background science. My questions are only two. 20% and 13% compared to what? What is the N? And then was any of that done in the blinded randomized test that's supposed to be done?
Okay, you'll have to repeat the second one because I didn't quite hear it, but the...
Was it blinded?
Oh, yeah.
Blinded and randomized.
Yeah, no, the study was not blinded, but the data was obtained by third-party analysts who had no concept of who was who. So we sent our blood samples up to Stanford Human Immune Monitoring Center, and they did they did cytoff on the cells, since we had all these markers, and we just looked at the data that they brought back. Yeah, so it's all compared to baseline. So each person was compared to himself. Yes. And the N value was 9. So there were 9 people in the trial, but we had 2 data points at time 0 to anchor that a little bit better. So we know what the variance was before the intervention took place. So you can compare back statistically to see if there was a change or not. So that's why we were able to get the statistics done. And then, so that's answered. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Irina.
Blinded and randomized.
Yeah, no. So you cannot blind this study. It's not possible.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
But it's reproducible. And I've shown you over and over again that we're able to reproduce every facet of it, that it has consequences that make logical sense, that are physiologically and immunologically significant and important. And I just believe that, as a matter of fact, Irina, first of all, I'm not an immunologist, so I cannot compare myself to you as an immunologist, but I will tell you that there's a paper in the literature that says that there are thymic epithelial cells that persist at least to the age of 107. So I think that we do have some left, maybe not very many, but as long as you can get them to divide, you can bring them back. Okay.
I think Shannon, yeah. Shannon had a question. You have a question too? Okay, we're going to go for Shannon, and then we're going to do one more, and we'll go back to our next speaker. Sorry, we're getting a little long, but I guess it's kind of important. Go ahead, yeah.
I have actually just 2, I think, quick questions. One is there a thymus regenerative cocktail? And the second question goes back to the last panel, and I'm afraid it might be a no. However, is there perhaps, or is there one being worked on, an HRT test to personalize HRT? Like a hormone test to create a personalized HRT treatment?
Yeah, so on the second question, if you're talking about sex hormone, on that last question, you're talking about sex hormone HRT. So actually, the women in our trials are all postmenopausal and not on HRT. So we have no information about that for a couple of reasons. One, when these studies were done, the news that HRT might be safe had not come out yet, and we were concerned about cancer risks, especially adding a lot of different things that might individually be okay, but you put them together, you get into trouble, so we just didn't want to go there. So we don't have that data, but we're willing to look at it. So actually, one of the women in XP consented to really lower her dose of HRT, and so she feels okay, but the dose is within the range that we've seen before, so we're pretty comfortable, and she's doing quite well. But what was your first question?
Is there a thymus regenerative cocktail available?
Okay, so is there a thymus regeneration cocktail available? There really isn't at this point. We do all of our work under an IND with the FDA. We do all of our work under an IRB. It's a formal clinical trial. And so we're not able to offer this more widely than that, although we're looking into possibilities of that. And we are able to do this overseas, and the Hulk-like performance that I showed you was one guy who was actually living in the UK. He was treated as a patient, not as part of a trial. But we treat the patients just as though they were in the trial. People have got to be scrutinized repeatedly, intensively, and it's a very time-consuming process to adjust the treatment that we do give to each individual. It looks simple and easy. It's far from simple and easy.
But that would be like DHA?
Yeah. So it's growth hormone, DHEA, and metformin. We've actually, so the reason that XP is working so much better is that we've had enough experience now to look at secondary and tertiary effects. So the primary effects are good, but then the effectiveness is limited by these secondary and tertiary effects. But we found ways of intervening with nutrients to sort of take care of those other problems, and it's working like gangbusters so far, and we have further improvements in mind. But it's not available commercially yet, although maybe in a year. We'll see.
So just about HRT, as you mentioned, Shannon, I have not mentioned this, but I'm going to do it right now because I think it's appropriate because we're talking about HRT and medicine and so on. But both Greg Fahy and Greg Cole were actually going to be witnesses at a hearing regarding my mother. So she had severe sarcopenia, and we were going to give her growth hormone to help that. But apparently, so the doctor's solution to sarcopenia was pulling out her feeding tube and letting her starve to death. We were going to advocate hormone therapy to address the sarcopenia, but the doctors refused because of the risks involved. Does that make sense? They're going to pull out her feeding tube, and they don't want to give her hormone therapy because it would be possibly harmful. This is yet another thing that we need to public health thing that we need to address, that pulling out people's feeding tubes is not a solution for sarcopenia, okay? So I just want to also thank Greg and Greg Fahy and Greg Cole for being witnesses to this hearing. And by the way, my mother passed away just about a week before the hearing would have taken place. So I just want to shout out. And by the way, she was just about 3 days short of her 90th birthday, and she could have gone a lot longer. But again, it's not I'm not blaming our medical system. It's not their fault. They're just doing kind of what they're told to do or whatever. But maybe we should change that. Okay. So anyways, one more question here.
Yeah, so sorry about your loss, Steve, actually. Yeah. Yeah, so the thymus gland has been, it's very fascinating, right? It's just a puberty, it just basically goes quiet and it's replaced by fat or just filled with fat, right? And just stays dormant, actually. So I was just thinking, like, Shannon asked part of my question, but what are the lifestyle, is there any way for, the lifestyle changes, actually? My question is this the, elixir to longevity with others who live longer versus those who don't? Do they have activated or have a way to activate the gland?
Yeah, so the health of the thymus is dependent on your lifestyle, depends on whether you smoke and do that sort of thing. The paper that I cited from Nature that was published last month, I believe, discusses some of the things that influence the health of the thymus. Interestingly enough, drinking is not one of them. So alcohol is okay as far as the thymus is concerned.
So very important question, Pinot Noir or Cabernet? I say both.
Yeah, I say both.
Okay,
Right.
problem solved. Thank you, sir. Thank you, doctor. Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful talk. Thank you so much. Okay.